A case study, type A to type B personality. I haven't studied much those types, but intuitively I felt that I might fit into type A personality. Just remembering my early years in Japan, Toshiba, there's the self-appraisal process they have, and I remember writing that I tend to rush to live ahead of time. So instead of moment to moment, be aware, I'm rushing toward the future. As I was growing up, learning from Edison, inspiration, perspiration, Japan, business, competition, the whole nation is moving in one direction, and whether that was an influence or not, but probably also because my father and grandfather, even my grandmother, had certain tendency of getting things done early. Entrepreneurial, out of the box, exploring. My grandfather came from the remote part of Japan to Tokyo and started the business. And he succeeded in some way or the other. And at age 50, he was drinking a lot or something. That's what I heard. Not much information, but that's pretty much all I remember. My father was entrepreneurial, even in a big company. And I've seen good and bad of what I felt applied, coming out of his way of living. My mother was more quiet type, typical Japanese, remind me of the lily or some plant, quietly enjoying, but not to be disturbed. I feel I have those two personalities in me, but born in Japan and going through that economic expansion time, I felt that I was in the same direction without knowing other reference at the time. But I had a question about it. So I remember that one thing I did was I didn't like the bureaucracy, so I want to break it. Maybe that's also a type A personality. But reflecting back, rushing, trying to do this, trying to do that, the life was full of adventure, curiosity I had, and not just in Japan, but outside. I studied Zen, I studied management. Didn't get much out of it, didn't get the sense of what it is. So eventually I went into nuclear business, computer science, programming, simulation, core meltdown, all of that, probability analysis. That was engineering direction. Also the management direction. I learned that the Stanford was number one at the time, and is still the top ranking business school. And I found in the Newsweek magazine, and then I went to Stanford out of nuclear engineering background. So I kept on moving in this direction, but into Zen and going through that process of awakening and moving forward requires lots of energy, perspiration to get the 1% inspiration. Very similar. And I was inspired, and I went through that. I went through this Vipassana, awakening moment, and still curious about the way of my life. And I was so inspired by the Bodhisattva's vow, which basically talk about the life is full of suffering. There's a way to get out of it. And then, what's the Fourth Noble Path? And also, there's a vow of Bodhisattva talking about helping people and learning the Dharma, the law. There are many of them we have to learn and live life accordingly. Something like that. There are 3 of them, so there may be one missing. In any case, I had that inspiration, the vision, and I worked as a consultant and also even in the M&A business turning around business here and there, I applied those ideas with the idea of people empowered have their own destiny. So it's my type A personality, but also relating to other people in general, because I remember from my early days, some people are handicapped in the sense of the financial wealth, for example. I remember a young guy in elementary school. Perhaps I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and he was hiding his lunchbox, and within the lunchbox there was only one little plum or something sitting, whereas my lunchbox my mother makes, everybody had their lunchboxes. My mother had more stuff in there, the fish and the eggs and stuff like that. So he was hiding his lunchbox, and I felt, what's going on here? So figuring out how everyone can be empowered to achieve their dream, coming out of difficulty, not a good environment, but still accomplishing something and feeling good and having fun and be happy about. That was instilled in me that I wanted to do. Invention, Edison, that's one way, the technology. Management, that's another way. But also Zen is related to the internal development, the growth of each individual. Awakening is to open up from the egocentric way to non-ego. See things as they are and figure out the way, not by your own, but also relating to what we can capture from what's around. Meaning that as much as the law of the universe is prevailing everywhere, we want to connect that and utilize those force, the energy, the law, aligned to what we do. Therefore, everybody have a chance. So Bodhisattva and the Zen is connected to that. And I have spent so much time, on one hand, working with the companies to transform with people involved, better management process, PDCA, vision, KPI, learning, mini companies, annual report, all of that. As well as for me to apply the same concept of life profile, what my KPI as individual, PDCA, review it, be sincere and truthful, that's one of them, but also looking at the work, hobby, health, finance, things, relationship, those items, so that my life is better balanced. But coming back to those ideas I had and implemented, I'm now talking about this reflection period of mine, and going through difficulties would give us lots of opportunity to learn. So one of the key points that I realized and wanted to put some word in the voice memo to share is even type A personality person can move into type B personality person. That's the idea that popped up. What does that mean? As much as I'm curious to explore things, that's another barrier I want to bridge, because the type A tend to be thinking forward and pushing, but at the age 74, you start to realize how much more you want to push. And looking around, I know people, not many, but one individual in my mind who is more composed, and he doesn't do much of anything but be with the flow. Not type A personality, and he admires me in a way that I do so many things, but he doesn't do many things, but his action shows that he's well composed, meaning with a calm and quiet mind. And when there's a difficulty, he can reflect, stay put, and come up with the answer. So we communicate quite well, but this person existence and getting to know and going through the difficulties how to overcome at the older age. You don't want to do that. But you never know, the life is such that some unknown event happens. And then you still want to have the drive to go through on one hand. But how to do it? Would I do it in a type A personality to go through that? Or would type B personality? So that's the question I had. And to say it simply, what it means by type B from my point of view is more about acceptance. Clearly understand what's going on. May not have a strong energy drive, but the energy is spent to see the balancing act of what's going on. Give another example. This is the case of a lady, ex-partner. We split up 2.5 years ago, and because of the COVID, I was in New Zealand, she was in California, and then I came back, and now I'm staying at her place. And having 2.5 years in New Zealand and going through process of know thyself alone and connected to nature, melting into nature, and into that Zen, meditation, all of that. That gave me a very interesting time to reflect. Even though I had some unknown event popped up and consumed that energy, I can reflect and look back and say, you can take it positively. And one of the impact that I may have gained is the point of this type A to type B transformation within myself. When you study and practice or try to practice Zen, it is quite interesting. So many books and information, people, and I have digested so much, and also through meditation, call it awakening experience, and keep digging in. And what the point is that, well, let's give another example. This is the Buddha facing the army after 3 days of standing so that the army cannot go forward. He left. And the nation was perished. Shaka clan was perished in the sense of taken over by this army. Why did he do that? That was the quiz I put on myself to see what it means. And if I say just briefly, what it may mean is that accepting what is inevitable and find your passage. And his way is after 3 days, he chose not to be standing for the rest of his life, or maybe to convince the army for why do you do that? Or he may have decided, since he couldn't convince them, he tried to find a different way of convincing, not directly to that army and the people or general, whoever was doing the job, but more for the humanity. That's kind of like my answer to that quiz, why he left after 3 days. Not protecting to the people in the nation. It's a tough choice, but as much as any life has its own reasoning to be like that, and the passage could be different, would be different for every person, we still figure out, find the insight, the wisdom, and find the passage to move forward. And in that process, this idea of a type A to type B can be applied too. I tend to think Buddha was more introspective, introvert, as much as I feel I am like that, although I may talk at occasion quite a bit. If I see something very important, I spread out. If not, then I just leave. Anyway, that orientation is not leaving perhaps if I'm type B, but assimilate or connect to the environment more so and go with the flow, so to speak, instead of a more, if you call it aggressive, even if it's with good reason, altruistic. There are many ways to deal with the situation. So that's the koan of life that pops up. And we are to be prepared, koan meaning the hurdles, difficulties. Sometimes you have to go beyond the mind to solve it. And that includes your changing your personality. That sounds ridiculously difficult to do, but why not? Flexible mind is the notion in Zen, and water is the analogy of being flexible. So over, I don't know how many years of me into Zen, 30, 40 years, I'm starting to realize that that's an area that I can see me going in. Perhaps also because of my age and my energy may be dwindling. So it's stupid to keep on pushing your idea, but then you start to find a way to get into the coffin. That's not a good image, but be sensible to the environment. Be sensible to my skill, ideas, whatever, and find the passage. And I thought I'll just say this much for my own sake, and if there's anyone listening, I guess the point is that there's always a way. And I start to sense the beauty of being passive, not, still introspective perhaps, introvert, but also connecting to the reality, be able to see things from different angle, and find the passage moving forward. Each situation has its own unique condition. And that's the way I see our life. But at the core is the law of nature manifesting, and we need to connect to that. And we may be able to address whatever so far as we can have the calm and quiet mind, and that's the critical issue, because if your mind is jumping around, you don't see things clearly. So it's a notion of, in Japanese, kaijoe, chira samadhi panya, right conduct, samadhi, calm and quiet mind, and insight. So I'm going back to the basic of the Buddhism or any process. It's an idea of the process control. There's a target, there's a process, there are contributing factors, and there's an input. And by changing the contributing factors, by prioritizing adequately, we can find a passage to suit the situation. Even the environment is changing and you are changing, so this process may not be easy, but being able to, or having gone through so many examples in the past at the old age, perhaps we may have better understanding of who I am, who we are, and what can be done. So let's see what happens. Have a good day. Thank you.